How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Once again, been a little bit since my last one. Work again probably isn't going to let up until we get through the holidays, but the good news is, as much as you guys haven't seen me, I also haven't been doing as much buying. So work has been keeping me a little too busy to actually spend some money, kind of take a step back from the hobby again, which is good every now and then. Take yourselves out of it for a bit. You don't feel the need to see what everybody's doing, buy what everybody's buying, kind of stick with the FOMO hot trends. So if nothing else, I've got that on my side. That said, I was able to work in one more what I consider big book that I had on my radar for quite a bit. It's another one of the more obscure random DC characters, just one that, once again, I also was first introduced to in Batman the Animated Series. That, again, you're going to hear it multiple times. That series alone is the reason why I know about nearly as many characters as I do, and why I sought to find out more about them and their own stories after the fact. But this one is a really cool one, a really obscure one. I don't really see anybody talking about this book or having it pop up in videos, so I thought this would be a really fun one to share with you guys that maybe you have not seen it before either. But that book is All-Star Western issue number 10, the first appearance of Jonah Hex. And I mentioned to you guys that whenever applicable, I'm trying to target certain DC obscure first appearances and at least a 9.0 or higher. This book in particular took me quite a bit of time to find in at first a 9.0. I think because this book right here, does it say on it? Oh, there we go. It's not a 100-pager, but it is a 52-page book, so it's hard to see, but this is a bit thicker of a book, and that's probably one of the leading causes why I don't really see this in too high a grade, especially for a book that came out in 1972. I know that's not, fairly new, that's still pretty long ago, but compared to some other books I've had my eye on, this one in particular was really tough to find in at least that 9.0 or higher. So I know there's one more listed on eBay right now that is for between 1,200 to 1,300. This one had been listed for a bit. I want to say it was around 1,100 also. And even then, so in full transparency, the seller offered a deal out to anybody that was watching it. I think I got this one for somewhere in the 900-ish range, somewhere between 900 to 1,000. So still a hefty price for this book. And this is one that I guarantee, if I had found an auction that had popped up and I had waited and I bided my time, I probably could have got it a decent amount cheaper than what I paid. But I have been watching and looking out for this book for a long time. I have in my eBay searches, I have this saved. So anytime I have All-Star Western 10 CGC, that is all I have in for a description. So anytime there's a new listing that pops up that falls into that, I get a notification. And even still, the $1,200 to $1,300 one that's listed now is the only new one that has come up in at least the 9.0 range since I've been watching this book. And that's, again, I've been watching it for a long time. So it got to the point where I figured, even if one comes up down the road, I'm not going to take that chance. I'd rather just own it and have it in my collection at this point. This is a really cool, fun character that, like I said, was first introduced to me in Batman the Animated Series. And this book actually brought up a pretty interesting, what I consider now, I wouldn't necessarily call it a plot hole, but it's something that bugs me a little bit more about watching where they took certain characters. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But for now, let's do a nice little close-up of the book, because this, there we go, without the ring light on it. And so while, it doesn't have him in full detail on the cover, you do have him on the cover, just that little bit of light reflecting off of, the one kind of messed up eye, his shadow coming between the doors, which I think, even though it's not him on the cover in full detail, it is still everything that kind of embodies the character of Jonah Hex. So, beautiful cover, beautiful book. Like I said, it's a little thicker, hence why I'm sure it was probably as tough as it is to find one in a high grade. And with how busy I've been, before I brought this up, I wanted to rewatch the animated series and Batman Beyond before I brought this up. But we're just going to bring it up anyway. And if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. If you guys think of something that I haven't, put that in the comments. And Spoiler alerts, if you have not seen Batman the Animated Series and Batman Beyond, if you haven't at this point, as I know it's been out for a bit, but I am going to talk about some spoilers for some episodes, so if you do care, probably just turn the video off now. So, one of the things that was a bit more of a shock value is, alright, first this episode. So, at the end of the episode where Jonah Hex is introduced, you have pretty much Ra's al Ghul was breaking somebody out of, I think it was a hospital at the time, and Robin and Batman had tracked him down to, I believe, the airport, but on their way to the airport, he had left them a tape detailing a story of why he just did what he did. And in that story, you realize, and he goes back, that way back when, he was in charge of this giant operation with this very villainous character in charge that Jonah Hex ended up bumping heads with and ended up being the main protagonist, antagonist of that story with. So loop around, it turns out that Jonah Hex, that pain in the butt that he was dealing with that entire episode, was actually the son of Ra's al Ghul as well. And like I said, I wanted to rewatch the episode, so I don't remember the name off the top of my head. But there was a bit of a twist that we all knew of Talia al Ghul. And at that point, Ra's says a line himself, something to along the lines of, "With how long I've lived, did you really think I would only sire only one heir or one child?" Which is a very good point. For a man that's been alive hundreds of years, it was kind of unrealistic that Talia would be his one child. So, but because of that, now I'm going to fast forward to Batman Beyond, because you have an episode where Talia, you have Bruce Wayne, who's much older, and Talia reintroduces herself into Bruce Wayne's life and kind of sets up certain scenarios where he is forced to feel his mortality and his age and how much it is affecting him. There is very specifically a scenario where he is unable to save a damsel in distress because of how old he is. And that after Talia made the deal that she could kind of get him his youth back was the tipping block that sent him into actually taking her up on it. She says that she had perfected the Lazarus Pit process so it was not nearly as painful and chaotic and unpredictable as it was before. So he finally takes her up on it, and by the end of the episode, it is revealed that Talia is actually Ra's al Ghul in Talia's body. You know, pretty messed up. Which also what I love about that episode and the one with Jonah Hex. Jonah Hex has some beautiful one-liners in the episode he's in. But the Batman Beyond episode also has some great one-liners that are very quotable and really stick with you when you watch these episodes. So before, it kind of left it on a note where as much as he has done some horrible things, and yes, he's kind of left Talia for dead in a few scenarios, very specifically, the episode in Batman the Animated Series where he tells you and you find out he has this son, and at this point, he's very much in a vegetable-ish state. I'm not sure if it's just he's so far gone that that's where he is. I don't know if it's mentioned that the accident from way back with Jonah Hex left him in that state. But either way, his pleading marks with the Dark Knight were, just let me take my son home. So it was, again, what the animated series was so good at, for as villainous as these people can be, they still humanize them in just the right way. And then you flash forward again to Batman Beyond, where he quite literally takes over the body of his daughter. For all intents and purposes, Talia is dead. It's not like they're both rolling around in there. It is just him in there. And I know they primarily did it for shock value, but if he already had an heir, his son, who was in this state, and again, a male heir, why would he not take over the body of his son? If it was because of how old and fragile he was at that point, why not use the Lazarus Pit on him? You don't really need the mind to come back because you're going to plug your own mind into the body anyway. So I don't see age being a factor. I don't see his mind being gone really being a factor. The only thing I can really see is that maybe he died, the son died before Ra's al Ghul's body had also hit his limit. So at that point, maybe he did only have Talia. I also find it hard to believe that even though it's not canon, after how long he's been alive, he also only fathered 2 children. It just seems for a man so dead set on immortality and mortality that he'd only have 2 children. So Granted, the son could have died and Talia was the only option, and I know realistically it was just Talia is the more... Everybody knew Talia. She's popped up in the comics, in the animated series many times before. A lot of people were probably less familiar with the son who Jonah Hex had to deal with in his episode in Batman the Animated Series. And if nothing else, I'm sure they went with it also for more of the shock value. That Ra's al Ghul would go to any limit to cheat death and cheat his own death, that he was willing to sacrifice his own daughter, to be in the body of his own daughter to do so. And I get it, that works out. It was pretty shocking and led to some great reveals, some lines, some episodes. Batman telling Ra's al Ghul he hits like a girl. That was me and my brother, one of our favorites. But it kind of undoes a little bit more of like the humanization that they were able to do in Batman the Animated Series. And another good example is when Scott Snyder took over the New 52 Batman run. As much as I really, really loved his run, he did a very similar thing with Mr. Freeze, and I think it was the first Batman annual since he took the title over, where he did it more as a twist shock value, and as a as a what if story, it would have been a pretty cool, unique thing. Like, I would have liked seeing that. But for it trying to be canon, they made it so that instead of Mr. Freeze, who was doing all of this for his dying wife, who he was trying to find a cure for her disease, that was what led him down to the path of where he is now. He actually was never in love, or he was in love with, but that woman was never his wife. That he was essentially an obsessed stalker who fabricated this in his mind and was essentially tormenting this poor woman. That, again, I get what they're going for, the shock of it, and I would enjoy the twist had it not been canon. But Mr. Freeze in specific is one of the more sympathetic Batman villains you have, who has done extraordinarily well in Batman the Animated Series. And I feel like, again, this was done for shock value's sake and nothing else. Very similar to the Ra's al Ghul in Talia's body thing. So I just feel, as again, it was a great episode, great moments. I just feel that if you already had this son that you presented in the show canon, I feel like if they brought him back, like I said, granted, not as many people would know who he was, this one random son character from this one episode, but they could have done more with it. That if this son had returned, and you already know he's kind of a villain anyway, him having the twist reveal that Ra's al Ghul is actually in his body, while not having the exact same effect, I think it still would have had a pretty good effect, and would have made use of the fact that he had a son, he had a male heir, who, again, if he was mentally gone, just the body, plop that thing in the Lazarus pit, good to go, plug yourself in. It's like all the pieces there were primed and ready for that. So, yeah, that's what I got. If you guys have any more thoughts or comments or things I'm missing on why they couldn't have gone that route, like I said, more likely it's just because of the shock value of it. Talia is a more popular character, but if I was not as busy as I was, you guys wouldn't even have heard about this. But when looking over this book more and more, thinking about the episode where he was first introduced to me, and I was like, oh yeah, because in that one, it wasn't just Jonah Hex and how badass he was having to deal with Ra's al Ghul's son, and that, as again, the episode ended with a little bit more of a humanization of Ra's al Ghul at the end, again, just wanting to take his son home. So again, that led me down the Batman Beyond rabbit hole, and so on into the ramblings that you see before you. So that's all I got for today. I know it's been a little bit, but once again, I wanted to share a pretty unique DC Key book first appearance that maybe you have not seen before. If you have, you probably realize how hard it is to find in such a tough grade. So I am both excited to have this great edition to share it with you guys, as I am the rabbit hole that this book sent me down in terms of that one Batman Beyond episode, where this book kind of brought back a way of thinking that I didn't connect the dots until now, but now it bugs me a little bit, knowing they could have had that option of using the sun for that very specific storyline they took Talia down, and she could have probably been better utilized further on in the Batman Beyond after the fact. But either way, like I said, let me know your comments down below if there's something I'm missing, if there's something you guys have thought about very similar to that, if there's something that they did explain in the episodes that I'm just missing. Again, I'm going to go back and rewatch them. It's just, I've been extremely busy, but the more I have gotten to doing this video, And looking at this book, the more I've sat and stewed about it, and wanted to mention it when going over this. So if you stuck on this long, thank you guys for watching the video. Until next time.